Okay, so I think you suggested I start with this. So this is my draft, so Peter may add something. Welcome those of you who are here so far. Let me just close this untidy thing. Behave, there we are. The ground rules, the Pennon Credo, ground rules for the Peter Fleming Forum and elsewhere in Pennon. The ground rules in the Pennon Credo are designed to support a safe, nourishing environment. We ask that you come to the meeting with a clear head free of the influence of drink and drugs. 2, in any Pennon setting, you keep control of the pace and depth of your work. You may pass or say no to any suggestion. Your no will be accepted and not judged or analyzed. No means no. 3, even though the meetings are recorded, we ask that people respect the confidentiality of those present and do not share anything they heard outside the meeting. 4, in Pennon work, we have a strict no gossip rule. No gossip means we do not talk about anyone who is not present, even in a pleasant way.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for having it up there like that. So we're going to do who we are and where we are, okay? I'm Peter and I'm in Norfolk, England. Nikki?
Nikki, I'm in Wimbledon, England.
Okay. Mary S?
I'm Mary and I'm in Eastbourne on the south coast of England.
Yeah. Mary?
I'm Mary, I'm in Rosarito Beach, Mexico.
Cynthia?
I'm Cynthia. I'm in Kankakee, Illinois, which is just a little south of Chicago.
Okay. Johnny?
Right on, Cynthia. I'm from California, so I was like, I want to go to England. Shoot. Yeah. So yeah, I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay. I like doing that. I really do. Something about the spread of it, and because I don't know, we get into things. Well, yeah, that person's in way over there. Yeah. And I've been there. I've never been there. I want to go there. Just something about the geography of it I like. What I'm presenting today is the part of Pennon work that's called 7 Levels of Listening. And I guess it's a part of, we did a session a couple of weeks ago, which was on the first level of listening, which is called passive listening. And passive listening is a form of meditation. It's letting in what people are saying without reacting or responding inwardly or outwardly. It's totally parallel to meditation, as meditation is concentrating on something, a mantra. A simple way of meditating is concentrating on our breathing and letting everything else go. Well, passive listening is letting in what someone's saying and letting everything else go, whether they're our defenses or our history or our values. Anyway, that's the first level of listening. And we hit passive listening. We use practice. Passive listening is something that sort of almost underlies a great deal of our work. It's very fundamental. Presenting it to someone like you, Johnny, what I say about passive listening will change your life, money back guarantee, and I don't say that about any other part of my work, okay? And it's a strong statement, but it's true, because passive listen, just one example of it, passive listening enables us to let in, reflect on, listen to things that are said to us by people we most love but we do not want to hear. So that's one pitch for passive listening. Because it is the case that often the person we most care about is the person we can least listen to. And the reason for that, we're just doing some introductory work on listening, which is a big part of my work.
Thank you.
And we talk about 7 levels of listening. The levels of listening, I believe, create a great deal of precision, particularly those of us who are working in the helping professions. Great deal of precision, great deal of accuracy. And we'll get at how that happens. And that's just not about that's just not about people in the helping professions. It can also provide a great deal of accuracy in terms of family relations, we got business relationships, we got whatever. Whether we're listening to someone we've just met or listening to someone who we knew for years and years and years, listening, the levels of listening provide precision. In another way, however, they also carry our history and our values. So I'm going to go through them rather quickly to get the definitions out. There are 7 levels of listening, and they go from, I guess you could say, Zen Buddhism to psychoanalysis. They go from being absolutely open to what someone's saying to us and not putting in any reactions or any interpretations, which is the first level. And the 7th level of listening is called evaluation, and that's about doing all the assessments, diagnoses that we want, okay? So they go from sort of top to bottom, 1 to 7. The first one is the meditative level, which is passive listening. The last one's the analytical level, which is evaluation. There is a video on this material on the Pelham website, about half an hour long. It's pretty good. So we talk about 7 levels of listening because we want to make listening something that we can directly study and directly learn about and improve. And listening's got an odd quality. Like we don't know how someone is listening. It's almost got a secretive quality to it. Someone may be listening to us, may not. They may be interested in what we're saying, they may not. And we don't always know. So listening's got that particular quality to it. Okay. The first level of listening is passive listening. It's a form of meditation, comes from Zen Buddhism, and also comes from Gestalt therapy. And passive listening is letting in what someone is saying and just letting it in, as if we're in an empty vessel and we're just letting in what someone's saying. No interpretation, no assessment there. No mental activity. Okay. The second level of listening is called content, and that is in some ways very similar to passive listening. But passive listening, we're literally making no judgments at all. In content, we're highlighting. We're sort of highlighting. I might be talking about something, and then, I don't know, just talking on, and I use an example of, I'm worried about my son, okay? In content, we sort of underline that. I guess content, on some level, which you can look at another time, the 7 levels of listening are very comprehensive, very demanding, quite sophisticated, and in another way, they're common sense. But there is a certain common sense in, okay, we're really talking about, I'm pleased to meet up again, we're having a cup of coffee, whatever. But then I say something important about my work, okay? Say someone says, I think I'm about to get fired, or I think I'm about to get promoted. We sort of highlight something that is important. And in that highlighting, we retain it. But while we're highlighting it in the second level of listening, which is content, we're not doing anything with it. We're just noting it. Hey, he said he thinks he's getting a promotion. Yeah. Highlighting in the sense of, that's something I'd like us to get back to. That's the second level of listening. The third level of listening is called the obvious, and it is one of those that are both a bit hard to grasp at first, but can provide an enormous accuracy. One of the things that the levels of listening provide is a quite stunning accuracy, if you practice them, if you use them. What the obvious is the obvious thing that is happening, or it's the patterns that are there. It's a bird's eye view. Someone might always talk about their kids one way or another. Someone else might never talk about their kids. Those two things are obvious. Someone might always be talking about politics or never talking about politics. That's another obvious. The levels of listening in this time can have a particular power to them. There can be an obvious in how someone does or does not talk about the coronavirus. And the obvious is taking that piece of listening in from somebody, but again, here in this part of the work, we're not doing anything with that. We're just noticing it. We're noticing that someone always talks about their kids or never talks about their kids. We're noticing that someone's always got something negative to say or never has anything negative to say. We're noticing those things. We're noticing the obvious patterns and repetitions. And that part of the work comes from Gestalt therapy and the school of psychology that's called phenomenology. And those three, plus the next one I'll get to in a moment, but those three, passive listening, which is being an empty vessel, just letting stuff in, content, which is listening with a deliberate concentration and underlying important things. And the third one obvious, which is noticing patterns, those we often talk about sort of the top of the levels of listening. As we get further along, we'll be talking about going back up the levels of listening. And going back up means getting into those three, which have it's a phrase, a word I used about passive listening. They do have a certain purity to them, if we can get into them. Just the same as meditation has a purity in it. And certainly if you are practicing meditation, you know when you're not doing it, or when you can't do it. That's there, and that means something. When someone or any of us can't get into the top three, then there's something going on, you know. And in a sense, it's more about us than the person we're listening to. The fourth level of listening has a bit more interpretation in it, as the obvious has a bit of interpretation in it. You know, we are deciding what the pattern is. In content, we are doing the underlying. So there's little bits of interpretation there, but not much. In voice, what we're looking for is the message that is in someone's voice. And what does that tell us? Someone might have a warm voice or a cold voice. Someone might always be, you know, talking in a monotone. Someone might have have one voice when they're talking about politics and a very different voice when they're talking about their kids. You know, so it's the message in the voice that it doesn't even matter if we don't know the language, we'd get the message from the voice. That's a sort of example of it. In terms of the work, the session we had on Wednesday, which is about what we call chair work, the whole voice thing is crucial. Just going back to that for those who were there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because how my brain works, I guess like everyone else is like, my brain loves making connections. That's what it does. And so in the acting world, my brain just took like, oh, that's exactly what I pay a lot of money. What they tell us in the acting world is you're not on your voice. You got to speak on your, like, here's all the dialogue. Yeah, great script, wonderful, but you're not on your voice. It doesn't matter what the words are. It's the tone of, is it coming from your voice? So I was like, so completely relatable to the acting world.
Yeah, well, and that's where it came from. My, because this part of the work's mine, not David Pellin, and where the voice level came from was me studying theatre improvisation and the work of Viola Spolin. So what you're saying absolutely fits, right?
That makes sense because I did improv unknowingly. I was getting therapy.
Yeah.
That's what saved me. I was like, wait, I was getting therapy? So,
yeah.
But okay, we're on the same page. All right, this all makes sense now. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so we got passive listening, content, obvious, and voice. The next three are ones that most of us are sort of more interested in. Those top three, certainly the top three, that's real discipline. It's real discipline to passive listen, hear someone say something that sparks your interest or around which you feel attacked and not having any reaction. Most of it's that's discipline. The fifth level of listening is the bit we do all the time, but we sort of separate reaction. An emotional reaction is simply that, our emotional reaction to what someone's saying. And, you know, some people call it, you know, a gut feeling, or, yeah, we're just in, someone is talking about something and it sparks off, if you remember back with the material, spark off a memory link for us. And what we look at in emotional reaction, within it, there is the sort of strength and weakness of intuition. And that's where, if I can remember to get at this, because passive listening, we claim, is a way to train our intuition. And those top three are, so we're saying intuition can be trained. It is not something that someone's born with or not born with. And also passive listening enormously aids memory. Emotional reaction is different. That's where we're relating to someone in the way most of us like to, on a feeling level. But within that level, we do make a distinction between the part of emotional reaction that's about us. We meet someone and we, you know, we just have a reaction, an emotional reaction that this is a good person, this is someone, you know, or this person is really scary. There's something about this person that really scares me. Now, that reaction could be almost all about the other person and not much about us. We're just picking up a feeling that I like her, I don't like her. Or the emotional reaction could be mainly about us and not that much about the other person. So an emotional reaction, we're looking at two things. One thing is, well, this is my emotional reaction. And the second thing is, how much is this about me and how much is this about somebody else? If someone was talking to me and said they're going to go to Brazil for a holiday, you know, okay, you know, I don't have much emotional reaction to that. If someone says they're going to Vancouver Island for a holiday, wow, that's where my kids are, that's where my grandkids are. So I've got a big emotional reaction. So both people are just saying where they're going on vacation. But one will bring out an emotional reaction. But that emotional reaction is really all about me. It's all about me and my kids. Do interrupt if you've got any questions. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question too. You
Yeah.
go, Mary.
No, you go ahead.
I wasn't on mute. I didn't realize. I just unmuted myself. Yeah, I worry that the emotional reaction then isn't about listening. I relate that to in family dynamics that maybe are not healthy, where you might. I mean, I'm very lucky because I had two sons and I created healthy dialogue. And I didn't make it about me. But if somebody, you say, I feel this way, and they have an emotional reaction, they then start to project, and then they're not listening. They're no longer in listening mode.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why we have the 7 levels of listening, okay? Because what we can say, they're in the 5th level of listening, which is emotional reaction. But for us, the depth of listening is in those top 3.
Exactly.
Okay? So what we say in a situation like that, so you're saying something, I've got this big emotional reaction to it, and it just takes me into me about me, which I'm pretty good at doing. And me about me is not being there for you. We're talking about you. And what we say in this work, we say, can I go back up the levels of listening?
Yeah.
Because if I'm, and that's why I say, if someone's into meditation and they're not meditating, they'll know they're not meditating.
Yeah.
So if I can't go back to passive listening and content and obvious with you, and then I'm sort of stuck in my emotional reaction. And at that point, I'm just saying, okay, you know, today is not my day for listening, okay?
Yeah.
So the 7 levels of listening put us in a place where we sort of, and I think it's a kind of like for a lot of our work, it's not critical. It doesn't have to come from a problem place. It's just, oh, I can't passive listen today.
Yeah. But what I want to share is that most people can't passive listen. In my work, I'm a soul coach. I have to listen very deeply. I listen through meditation, meditative. But if you're speaking to somebody and you lose them in their emotional reaction, they can no longer listen to you. If they haven't been trained, they have no idea how to get themselves back because they're in their emotional reaction. And I hate to say, but that is quite a high percentage of the world. I think that's why we're in so much trouble.
That's where I, you know, and I make my sales pitch for passive listening. Because, I mean, from the most senior politicians in the world about coronavirus and scientists to foster kids, which is a lot of my current work. I mean, those two, they're a pretty big stretch of, you know, the presidents and vice presidents and prime ministers of countries and foster kids. It's a pretty stretch of society.
Well, I don't know. I mean, hello.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the politicians can't listen to the scientists. And foster kids, all the, you know, there's all sorts of research and everyone goes in with their research models. Over and over again, foster kids say one thing, if asked, what do you want? You know, outside of pocket money, if they just listen to me.
Yeah.
Over and over again it comes back. If they just listen to me. And you could almost, when you talk to them, there's almost a certain plea when they say that. And I think it could take the same things for the scientists, whatever country. And, you know, if they just listen to us, it's almost the same. You know, if they just listen to our scientific research, we can take it back to the foster kids. If they just listen to what it's like to be here with mom. Anyway, so that's emotional reaction.
Excuse me, Peter, can I ask my question? So my question is, sometimes you have an emotional reaction that is feeling what you might call with the person. Like if someone is talking about a loss of someone dying, you might feel sad with them. If you had a huge pendulum swing because you just lost someone too, that's a kind of different end of the scale. But so don't we sometimes have an emotional reaction that kind of helps us feel closer to the person or tips us off if they turn us off, that maybe there's an arrogance there, for example, that they're not aware of? But are you saying that even if it's a kind of useful emotional reaction, and that's where I suppose it's a bit higher up the interpretive scale, for really taking somebody in, you need to do what you're calling go back up the list. Once you notice an emotional reaction, even if it's kind of with the person, that you need to go back up the levels of listening, so you're kind of with them in that accepting way. Do you understand what I mean? Is that what you're saying?
I got a bit distracted. I'm really sorry, but I don't know if anyone else does. But when someone else comes in, I get completely distracted for a moment. So I need you just to repeat a little bit of that.
Well, I'll try and repeat it shortly. What I was saying was, your example of if somebody mentioned Vancouver Island is very clear as an example of a pendulum swing that takes us right away from listening. But if you have like a, what you might call a quieter emotional reaction, like you just feel a bit sad with someone if they've just lost someone to death, or if they're feeling depressed or something like that, it's still about you to a certain extent, but it is about you, but it's a linking with the person. You're kind of connected.
Yeah, and you know, I teach this in a fairly rigorous way at first, right? But that level of listening, emotional reaction, I mean, in a sense, what else is there to life, right? You know, that sort of love, political passion, you know, poetic response to music. So, you know, there's all sorts of terrific stuff there. But what we're saying here, and just trying to get this particular, you know, set of tools across, is to be able to make a clear distinction. Probably the biggest use of these 7 tools, almost, we're coming up to another one, another big one in a minute, is passive listening and emotional reaction, okay? I've got an emotional reaction to you. You know, it's turmoil, you know, falling in love or being dumped. You know, we have emotional reactions. But being able to say, yeah, that's my emotional reaction. That's the method of the tools, and it's the method of the Pelham lift, to be able to have that precision. And okay, can I go back up to passive listening and just passive listen to this person I'm A, falling in love with, or B, just dumped me? You know, can I passive listen or not? And then if we can't, well, we know we can't. So we know in some way, to put it simply, if we can't passive listen, don't make decisions. Put them off until you can. And then, of course, if I can't passive listening, I'm only in my emotional reaction. Okay, I need to realize that's me.
Yeah.
If I can go on to the next, yeah, thanks. If I can go on to the next one,
Can I just make a quick comment? I was just thinking about how therapists often, or that kind of person, profession, often are so thinking in terms of diagnosis that they kind of jump. It's not really the level of listening to the obvious, but they kind of jump to, they see something and hear something in what someone's saying, so they jump to a diagnosis. If they have an emotional reaction, they assume it's about the other person rather than them. And the person's all tied up in a neat box with a label, and they're only 5 minutes into listening to them.
Yeah, that's where, I mean, historically, that's where this came from. And, you know, all these years ago, which would be 60, his name was Teddy Mahood, and he was in an adult prison. He was 16 years old. It was before computers. There were paper files, and Teddy's file was about that thick. And my job there was, I was the diagnostician. I wrote treatment plan. And Teddy was impossible. They didn't have anywhere to put him, so they put him in an adult prison, a good adult prison, but he was still there. And I looked at the file, and it was this thick, way back here. I don't know how the hell it happened. He was diagnosed psychopathic, okay. And that affected how a whole lot of people related to him. And they were wrong. He wasn't. He was just wrong. I mean, that, you know, that and other, I can remember names, Teddy Mahood, Fred McKenzie. That's where a lot of this stuff came from. And that's where I thought, no, you don't go to the 7th level of listening quickly. And in our work, it's the 7th level of listening. You don't do quick diagnosis. And I think we've got that down in a very straightforward form. And that brings us to the sixth level of listening, which is called goodwill. And when I say it's a bit of a killer, it's a bit stark, because we define goodwill as someone's willingness and ability to change, okay? And you can learn, let me just go back a bit. You can learn to listen to your own level of emotional reaction. You can't do it all the time because it takes so much fun out of life. It'd be awful. But at times you can say, yeah, this is my emotional reaction. You can learn to hear that. You know, someone's talking to you and all you're doing is responding to them emotionally. Goodwill is whether someone's going to be willing or able to change. And you can almost say 1 to 10, you know, some of us have got really low goodwill and some of us have got high goodwill. And you can learn, this is a bit, you know, a bit hard to get across in one forum, but you can learn to hear it in somebody. And this is where you absolutely, okay. Low goodwill is someone who never says much about themselves, but is always asking questions about you. Someone who's sort of, you know, where do you work? You know, who's your husband? Who's your wife? A certain opaqueness. Someone who is incredibly enthusiastic. And even at times, there can be a lack of goodwill in some, I learned this, and again, it was, you know, where it came from, going back to all those years ago. Yeah, I learned that there's a certain way guys leaving prison, that, you know, I'm going to do it this time, you know, I've got so much from you, thank you. I'm not going to meet with them, and, you know, I'm going to do it differently, and I've got this new girlfriend, and you've given me so much. And over time, I learned that, wait a minute, that's the guy who's back in 8 months' time. But someone else had a certain sort of, yeah, okay, I committed a crime, I came to jail, but a lot of people who don't come to jail have done bad things. But to be frank, I'm tired of it. And I learned over time that a particular way of saying, I'm tired of it, was a real indication of someone who might do really well. So listening to goodwill is, and again, there's a lot of common sense in that. You know, someone who's too good to be true, someone else who's sort of really got their feet on the ground, being quite realistic. Yeah, and if someone says, I'm going to try, and there's a certain way of saying it, they are reaching out to you, and in terms of emotional reaction, they are reaching out into your emotional reaction, because they're reaching out, you know, I want you to believe I'm going to try. But I learned over time that just a particular way of saying trying was, and again, there's a lot of precision in this word. It really indicated someone who had a lot of goodwill. And, you know, when we don't have goodwill, we don't have it. And other people will hear it. And other people will, whether it's, you know, my particular terminology and structural or just common sense. Oh, yeah. You know, that's a bit, I don't quite grab that. I don't quite grab that. And with someone else will think, that person's for real. You know, as parents, we know there are moments like that with our kids. when they're more sort of pensive about realizing, particularly teenagers, that their lives are at a crossroad and they go this way or that way. Or when the stubbornness of, not listening to anything anyone is saying except their friends. So, there are times for all of us when we have goodwill and when we don't have goodwill. They're a very, very powerful tool. Because in Pelham, what we say, if someone doesn't have goodwill, I have a responsibility to hear that. And I have a responsibility to therefore not put on unrealistic expectations. If someone doesn't have much goodwill, I'm not going to be very effective with them, and that's all right.
Damn, that was it.
That's all right. But I'm still making the judgment about their goodwill.
That actually, I'm sorry not to cut you off, but I had an aha moment. So actually, I had this question in my head, so I was holding back. And then, because it's my pendulum is, I'm a goodwill person. I don't want anything from anybody. In fact, I got into it with, I have a renter who owes me like rent for 3 months. I go, I'm not kicking you out. I'm not. He got emotional. I listened to him. But what my issue is, everyone goes, Johnny, you shine your light, and then all of a sudden, boom, you shut it off. I go, well, yeah, because then I get taken advantage of. Then, where my brain was processing was, well, I guess if I'm not doing passive listening, then I can figure out that person's probably not somebody I should allow, because we're rebuilding my life is creating healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's where my brain connected with everything that you just said. It was like,
yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but I think that the Pelham 6th level of listening, okay, I think be very good for picking people picking tenants, because you could really feel it. And sometimes, because I know from other people's experience and way back my own, the person who's all enthusiastic, who you think is great and all enthusiastic.
Oh yeah, I got burned.
Exactly.
But I also related to my own life of those healthy boundaries of who am I going to allow into my garden, in life, and as the metaphor. And that's what my question was. Okay, I feel what you're saying, but then I was like, all right, I'm a listener. So I was listening, and then I got the message of, because now you're more aware of the people, your surroundings. Now you can pick and choose. I always looked at it as like, I take my gift now. I used to hide from my gift, because now I'm figuring out now everyone here is like helps people out with therapy. So I was a teacher. So for me, I guess this is where my brain's kicking it, the Jimmy Neutron brain, is that, I almost lost it. That's where my pendulum issue is. I always want to, I believe that we should be on the up, not in the middle, personally.
Yeah. I'll
you know what I mean? But in order to fly high, I have to fly with eagles. I can't be with, but what's helping me out is figuring out who I can surround myself with and who I can't, so I can be on the upswing.
Yeah, and what I want to teach you over time is the excitement you can have in the middle. Okay, and if you take the absolutely great actors, they act from the middle.
Yes, they do.
Because one thing, this is just going back to the pendulum, which is another part of our work, which is the way we look at feelings. But the middle of the pendulum can have a lot of excitement in it.
Yeah. So the class one of the schools that I go to is exactly what you guys are. I love how everything connects in my, for me. So that's what it was. It said, your job is just to let it, just feel it. Yeah. Just like, but hold on, it'll pass. Yeah. And so been doing that for 6 years. Yeah. But
one way that there's a particular, because as we get into this work more, and if you get into it and like it and practice it, one of the things that's really intriguing is the connection between the different levels of listening. You know, right now I'm just trying to define terms and get them across. But there's a certain emotional reaction we can have to someone. Now, if someone comes from Vancouver Island and they've got kids and they've got left-wing politics, I've got an emotional reaction to them, right? Now, within that emotional reaction, I'll take their goodwill. That's got to be a good person, okay? That person has high goodwill. They may not. You know, and a lot of people who profess I'm hesitating to say it because I'm male, but you know, that men who have all the right things to say about being feminist and this is great. I've just met this guy and he's got all these values, and yet to be in a relationship with him is a creep. And you know, that a lot of people have had experiences of that nature. And what that is confusing emotional reaction with goodwill. Because you got the same political beliefs as me, then you've got high goodwill, and the two aren't really in any way related at all. There's no evidence that people have virtue in proportion to their left-wing politics. No, history doesn't tell us that at all. And this is just a way of looking at that. Okay, I've got this emotional reaction to this person. I really like this person, but then I've got to check out what's that person going to be like to be in a relationship with. And it might not be there. The goodwill might not be there in terms of just fidelity, you know, at all.
Yep, sometimes it's better to drive a pickup truck than a Ferrari.
Okay.
Yeah, and you could also say,
That was
Peter,
good. That was good.
Yeah.
yeah, you could also say that's true in a business relationship. Like, you know, in my own business, when I'm looking to work with somebody, you know, I've just had that recently with a young man who's really enthusiastic. He says all the right things. And I've kind of overrode a few, how can I say? I've overrode stuff because I thought, yeah, he's young. He's probably not experienced, but his enthusiasm is really hot. And, you know, as I've started to work with him, he's not quite there. And it's like, my pendulum's swinging because I'm a very goodwill person, but in business, I can't afford to be that goodwill at the moment. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think there must be a kind of a structure to, you know, I'm very good in my soul work, like I do soul therapy, and I'm bringing all those first three levels. But in business, sometimes we can get caught out because we're in the moment and it's happening quite quickly. Does that make sense?
Oh yes, it does, and I think that'll be the topic of Wednesday's talk. I will get into part of this work that's called the life forces. I won't distract into that now.
Okay, cool.
Hopefully.
Thank you.
The seventh level of listening is the one that I guess people like me like most and are most naturally drawn to, and that's assessment, diagnosis, evaluation, you know, using all the capacities that our mind has in terms of taking in this information that is being given to us. What I've done with the 7 levels of listening, and that's where in many ways they do reflect our values as well as our history, because, you know, just to do a little recap, passive listening is Zen Buddhism. content is Carl Rogers. The third one, obvious, is Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls. The fourth, voice, is theatre work, Viola Spolin. The fifth one, emotional reaction, is again Carl Rogers and sort of all of us. Goodwill is sort of mine. And the seventh level of listening, evaluation, is, you know, Sigmund Freud and everything that went before him and after him. You know, it's analyzing everything. And what we've done with this, and these values, is dethroning analysis to some extent. And within this dethroning analysis, we are also looking at wisdom and human effective help that does not come from universities and professions, but comes from foster carers, low-paid care workers. I mean, you know, in America, the whole question of low-paid care workers, particularly in California, is politically exciting. But, you know, these are people who, from my perspective, provide hugely important services and get paid very little. People who know and get very little respect. Any foster carer anywhere in the world knows the statement, "You're just a foster carer." And it hurts. The people who deliver that statement, people like me, social workers, psychotherapists, magistrates, senior police people, doctors, have no idea how demeaning it is. And there's this is where almost the making evaluation the seventh level of listening, not the first, and in that sense dethroning the process of assessment and evaluation and putting it in a different perspective, which in this day and age, by the way, is very unpopular because so much is diagnosis.
Excuse me, Peter, can I just say something?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, because I believe I've heard you sometimes say about the seventh level of listening, use the word diagnosis. And I just wanted to point out to people that when someone in Pelin says evaluation and assessment, and occasionally might say diagnosis, we're talking about something like Peter meeting me in the 1970s and knowing that I was what we kind of colloquially call a pendulum swinger. I didn't get a diagnosis until 1998, 1999 probably, when I chose to see if a so-called psychiatrist thought I needed medication, which I'd always refused because I wanted my forthcoming marriage to work. And because of all the work I'd done with Peter, because I've been working on pendulum swinger diagnosis all that time, 20 odd years, he, some of you know this if you've seen my one-woman show, like Johnny's heard this before, he said, you've got so much self-awareness, I think you can manage without medication. So I just wanted to make sure that when people heard those words, evaluation, assessment, and diagnosis, we're not in any way taking a medical point of view. We're taking a point of view from within the richness of the Pelin tools. It might be the life forces, it might be this person needs purpose, it might be this person needs to contribute from their hurt, some of the things you've heard mentioned, but it's never anything to do with that dreaded DSM-5.
Oh, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, you see, you didn't quite realize that, but it's really important.
No, because I have been through a system. It's what the body of work that I've been developing aside from my main business, because I'm so passionate about realigning the human spirit to something that's been sadly overlooked. And so I'm completely with you path. And that's why I'm so interested in this work, because, you know, I've developed something which I think will help people. And it's definitely not the norm, my approach. And I think it's outmoded, this whole diagnostic thing. I mean, I could talk about it a lot, but I won't, because I don't want to interrupt Peter. But, you know, I've just had a friend recently saying she wanted to help people who came out of broken marriages or sudden deaths, you know, like children. And she was thinking there wasn't a place for the world in that. And I said, oh my God, there so is. People need this life raft. They need to be listened to. They don't need teaching or fixing, but they need someone to listen to them. They need someone to be there for them. And we're sadly missing that in our cultures. So
Yeah,
I'm so glad you've said that, Mary, because I feel it's brought up quite a lot of emotion for me, actually, around that subject.
yeah, there's a lot in the 7 levels of listening in terms of these forums. You know, we'll be getting back to them in other ways. What I'm laying out here is a pretty. Let me just go say a little bit about the 7th level of listening, which, you know, in my own way, I'm terribly fond of, because that's the way I made my career. I got a reputation of being a very good diagnostician in a traditional sense. Years before I met David Pellin or Fritz Perls. So, you know, it's a little bit, it's home base for me, so I'm not going to knock it. But, you know, I learned over time that there's, well, apart from anything else, I talked about Teddy, there are mistakes that can be made. And if someone's got a strong diagnosis, whatever it is, I realize I haven't made much time for other people to say things. So anyway, let me just finish this bit, and then other people might want to say things, people who haven't said anything yet. And again, these are just tools. We don't have all the answers. You know, this is our material on listening. And we're certainly saying we've only got a tiny bit of the whole truth about listening, not all of it. The little bit we do have, we're proud of. Other people, you know, I have passive listening. Other people have active listening. You know, there are different ways of approaching listening. But what we want is, and people say, you can't listen to all those 7 levels of listening. Nobody could do that. I'd say, yeah, I'll agree with that. But nobody could walk out onto the concert hall, sit down at a grand piano and play Bach. I cannot conceive that. I cannot conceive that someone could do that. But it's sort of rather evident that somebody can. And then play Beethoven and then play something else. I haven't got any idea how they do it, but they do it. So people can certainly do listening the way we're talking about. Know that. And the other thing that, because I haven't used that phrase before, I think I've gone through very radical times in my work, and then I've gone through very conservative times in my work. I think I'm going back into one of the more radical times of my work, because I haven't before said, well, you know, putting a diagnosis into our 7th level of listening simply dethrones it a bit. And I just like that Emma was saying that the challenge is to have a strong feeling about something, or having a strong assessment, decision, sureness about something. And then to be, while we're listening to somebody, and then being able to go back up the levels of listening going back up from 7, back up through the others, back up through obvious, back up through passive listening, and see where it stands then. And that's where this material provides a lot of accuracy. But we're not in any way dethroning it a bit in terms of being the epitome of the work, diagnosis or evaluation or assessment, but not in any way dethroning it in terms of how important it is. Anyone want to say anything? Come in there who hasn't? Cease, you want to say anything?
No, I'm just taking it all in and just identifying. For me, where I run into trouble would be that 5th step, the emotional reaction that I might have to what somebody is saying. If it's really strong, I might at that point really stop listening. And I think it goes back to what people were saying about looking at where I am on the pendulum and getting back into a listening state. But if I'm really triggered somehow, that's where I can, how would I say it? Just get off that path of listening. So I think that's the work for me, is when to recognize when I've gotten, had that reaction. That's sometimes I have a reaction and I can still listen, but other times it takes me too far out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Victoria? Oh, sorry, Elizabeth?
Mary, do I have to do anything for you to hear me?
No, you're right.
Okay. I've always been struck by the subtle uses of labels that occur in the first 6 levels of listening. I mean, there's like a level of, and I'm not good at sorting out which one is which. Okay, it's like it's not my gig, right? Okay, but you know, when you first begin with someone and you're just passive listening, you make choices all the time about what characteristics a person is displaying, and you reject seeing other things. Maybe unconsciously you reject seeing something else about the person, but you know, you notice what they're wearing, you notice how they hold themselves, you notice all these, and those are labels. Those are labels that, I mean, that eventually, I think, I'm just asking you, I don't know if I'm on the right track or not, okay? I just don't know.
No, you are. And in a sense, that's why we put so much emphasis on passive listening, because we're not doing that. Passive listening, I mean, it's sort of strange, but it's not even trying to remember. It's not even trying to understand. In that sense, the word I used the other day is a sort of purity to it.
Right.
We're just letting it in. And that's where the Zen bit comes in. We remember more in not trying to remember.
You know, it feels to me when you're describing this that it's a process of identifying the base that the person, the speaker is working from, like getting a sense of their geography more. I mean, it's like collecting that data, and you're trained, you know, if you're a therapist, you know, you get training in how to collect data, right?
Yeah.
And that's their base. That's their point from which they come into your communication, right?
Yeah.
With you. And then it's like their story comes in, and it's another thing that you have to shift to kind of get their story thing going on, you know, and hearing their story. And then when you get to the last part, it's sort of like you're figuring out how they function. When you analyze somebody and you figure out, you diagnose, right? you
Yeah,
figure
and
out,
that's the seventh level of listening.
yeah, you figure out how they function, right?
Yeah.
And so that really does it, that really tracks with a lot of teachings, both in Judaism, but particularly in Buddhism. That really tracks. You do base, and the label sort of inherent in the base, and then you do the story, you know, the path, and then you do the result, which a lot of times is the function, you know, of how what came before works. So I mean, that's great. This is great. The 7 levels are great.
Yeah. Nikki?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. No, I don't think I've got anything to say.
You don't
Thank
have
you.
to.
Yeah.
Okay. Victoria? Someone can always say they don't have anything to say.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to say that for me, it depends on whom I'm listening to. If I know I'm listening to a client, out of these tools, and depending on where I am with the client, I'm trying to incorporate the tools. If I'm listening to my child or to my friend or to somebody else, so I think it's wonderful to have these tools and then just decide which tool to take out, because I've never possibly could think of using all the 7 of them at the same time. Maybe I am playing Beethoven or Bach after the concert, because by training myself, but I just don't separate them, depending.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
one thing I've noticed, that when I'm for my work with this telephone service, when I can neither see the person, I don't know the name and nothing, so I cannot read anything. And even though it's this anonymous service, they always ask for your name. Well, we have like nicknames, because they would like to have something to hold on to, and they say your voice is the only thing that, and this is something magic as well, because when you see a person, there are many distractions, like especially when you look at Italians when they speak with their hands and everything. And so then there's like different layers which help and distract at the same time. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And sorry, I had to move all the time. We had a terrible thunderstorm here, so I had to.
Okay. Cynthia?
Yes. Hi. Yes, this actually was very, very useful. You know, I'm not a therapist, I'm an astrologer, so I come at things from a different angle, and some things are useful for that practice and some are not. But this is very useful. And I don't want to go on forever. I probably could, but it also, yesterday I went to a seminar about the role of an astrologer during dark times, and because I've been having some trouble with dealing with keeping my own emotional reaction to everything that's going on, still being able to sort of be present, but anyway, so I went to the seminar and it was really good. And I was thinking, I think there's a parallel, like one of the things he was talking about, like one of the things when there's difficult times, you want to find meaning. You want to find, there's a purpose to everything. But he was talking about if you jump to that too quickly, you're actually missing out a lot. And somehow I was sort of thinking that was related at that time, that seemed to have a parallel in passive listening, just sort of taking in what's happening, whether I'm looking in a chart or just in the world, without necessarily, there may be a purpose, but without jumping to an evaluation as to what and how it can be. I guess that I'll stop there, because my mind's been racing, because there's so much application in this to both when I look at charts and when I talk to people. I think it was great. Thank you.
Patricia, do you want to come in at all?
Oh, thank you, Fisa. Thank you for inviting me. I just wanted to say hello, and that I like to talk to you. I'm totally not, competent about what you're discussing. So, and I have my own way of, have my own insights, and so might be completely opposite to what you guys are discussing. I thought there was something you were saying that was interesting. The what was that? The trigger, being triggered, because I done a great work on self-awareness in terms of connecting with reality and understanding that what's in my head is not reality. But occasionally, so I stop and I reconnect with reality and I go into action, which is very fruitful for me when I can do that. But occasionally, on days, you know, such as this one, for instance, which is Mother's Day, and it's not a happy day for me. That's why I'm joining you guys, actually. But I get triggered. Like there are things that trigger me, and specifically, and it has to do with my body more than my mind, and I'm totally aware of what's happening, and it has, you know, memories and physical sensations, and I know that's not me, and I can stop and I can get responsible and get into action, what there is to do right now. But one thing that annoys me in how I operate is that I tend to block people, right? So I just, you know, if someone triggers me because, you know, someone is reconnected with me, which is a kind thing, through Facebook or something, and then they send me a message and then they try to, you know, whatever. I don't want to go into the story. I just, you know, I get triggered because there's a memory, there's a physical sensation, and there is some sort of trigger, and I just, you know, I choose not to reply. And so I basically cut off communication. And so, gosh, I don't know if that's relevant or pertinent to your work. You know that we've been talking one-on-one, and it's just, you know, very intellectual conversations that I enjoy, but I'm not completely fully, with all due respect, resonating with therapy and with all this that, you know, I feel like I'm very resistant to therapy. I think, you know, it keeps you stuck in the story, which is not reality. You know, as human beings, we something happens and we create a story, and then we conflate the story, you know, what really happened, with the story, and so that affects our entire lives. And I am detaching that. I am completely, and I feel like that talking about the story over and over again is very detrimental. And I'm speaking, you know, based on my experience of a sort of a cerebral educated person. And yeah, but that thing about the triggers, sorry, I'm actually taking a walk and trying to physical distance people coming from behind. So yeah, that thing about the mechanism of survival, that basically it's, you know, it's clear to me now. It's not a blind spot. It's kind of annoying. So I don't know if you have anything to say about that, and thank you for allowing me to share.
No, I'm glad you came. I guess, you know, I like to say over and over again that my work's about tools. People might find them useful or might find them not. I guess I'd also like to say it's a body of work. And the thing I like to say about a body of work is that people take away from it what they want. You know, happens to be my favorite novel, and then my favorite playwright, I guess. But you know, I had a couple of friends who were Melville scholars. You know, they wrote books about Herman Melville and Moby Dick. But even nobody takes away from Moby Dick everything he put into it. And most people just take away a little bit. You know, most people go to a great movie or a great play, and they take away a little bit of it. They don't take away all of it. And I think those of us who, you know, develop schools of thought and practice need to be able to get into that sort of thinking. And that's something I'm very proud of about Palin. You know, people can come in, and I reckon if I gave an examination to people who've been my students, and some of whom are on this screen right now, and I said, okay, write down the 7 levels of listening. I don't think people will be able to do it. It's not what we do, you know, it's not sort of something about knowledge. I don't want to go into that. But so I guess what I'd encourage Patricia is, you know, come in where you want to and take away that which you want to. And there's something about Palin that is like that. There's no particular point of entry where you've got to start. Someone could start with a pendulum, someone could certainly start with contribution from hurt. You know, someone could start with the material I want to look at probably over a couple of sessions or 3 sessions we call the life forces. But I want to present it in such a way, and that's why I'm developing this concept of the Palin lift. I want people to be able to come and say, hey, that bit's useful for me. And that's okay. Someone doesn't have to sort of buy the whole thing. And, you know, even at all. And it's also not where people take away the really important, life-changing experiences. People don't take away a whole body of, you know, people don't join 4 tennis clubs. They might play tennis twice a year. I don't know if getting the point across, but on the one hand, we're sort of quite passionate about what we've got, and it's very comprehensive, and et cetera, et cetera. But if someone wants to come in and just say, I just like that bit, I'm not interested in the rest, but I just like that bit. And that's where I think, you know, the question, you know, therapy or not therapy is just a huge question, you know, huge. I'm a huge supporter of Alcoholics Anonymous, huge. But I'm very experienced with addictions and substance abuse because of my work. And I know that some people don't like AA, don't go there, and do very well and get off booze. So there's something sort of empirical about it, and small slices, I guess. And a slice that works for you.
Thank you. I didn't mean to be attacking anything or being
No, you
defensive.
weren't. No, I don't feel
Thanks.
that at all. I don't
All right,
feel that
thanks.
at all.
All right.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything about this bit of it, Mary Stapleton?
I'm retired now, but I have continued to find the Pelin tools useful, you know, in interpersonal relationships. And with this listening, it's particularly relevant to my relationship with my 2 grown-up sons. And being their mum, I automatically used to go in straight into the analysing, the diagnosing part of listening. You know, I know you inside out. You know, this is what you need to be doing, and what, you know, and it took
We're programmed. Parents are always.
Couple of years ago, my eldest son was going through a particularly bad time. He now lives in Vancouver, Peter. And I went out to stay with him for 5 months. And he said to me at one point when we were getting into a heavy discussion, he said, "You're not listening to me. You're not hearing me. You're hearing Tim," which is his dad. And it was such an eye-opener for me, because he was perfectly right. You know, he looks like his dad, the tone of voice is like his dad, you know, but he isn't his dad. He's very different to his dad. But he was right. I had been hearing my ex-husband, and that moment was like a turnaround, and I've learned to listen to both of them now, my younger son as well, to cut out any of the analysis or diagnosis. It's not useful at all. I just want to listen totally empty and hear them and who they are, and it has transformed my relationships with them.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone want to say anything before we start with that little round about where we are?
Were you going to explain to people what we do? Because some people haven't been on the call before. About you calling on them, I meant.
Yeah, I'm a bit awkward about that. That's probably why I haven't explained it. I don't know. I haven't worked out another way to do it except to call on people, okay? Because there's not everyone. I'm used to people all sitting in a room around a circle. So I call on people, and we end up just by saying our name. We might want to say something about today.
Where we are.
Where we're located, okay? Yeah. I'll go first. And then I'll call people's names. I hope you don't mind that method. Yeah, I'm Peter. I'm in King's Lynn, which is on the east coast of England. And I'm getting more confident with this, but I'm still in some way struggling with it. Yeah, that's me. Cynthia?
Hi, Cynthia. I'm in Kankakee, Illinois, which is about 40 minutes south of Chicago. This was really good. I really appreciated it. I found it very helpful. And my mind's, as I said, my mind's spinning of how I do apply it and how I can apply it. And so thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. Elizabeth?
I'm Elizabeth. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in the States. And it was really interesting to me how the seventh method of listening that's the culmination. I mean, it's not, it's the exact reverse of a standard therapeutic model. And it made me really think about how much data has to be collected prior to that seventh level of listening. And that was really helpful.
Johnny?
Oh, yes, Johnny. I'm Los Angeles, California. And I'm like so connected with Cynthia because my brain's the same way. It's literally like making all these neuron transactions. I love hearing everyone's point of views, and like, because Elizabeth, you pretty much said what my brain was thinking. You articulated it.
That's really scary.
You know what I mean? And so for me, I'll just cut through the bullshit. So I'm a farmer, high school agriculture teacher. I was that, and what I'm getting at, it goes back to what Cynthia said. It's literally that seventh thing, because you're trusting you're literally listening to yourself ultimately. And that's the human connection of connects. Literally, this is awesome how I'm connected to everybody around the world. So that's what I'm trying to get at. I mean, I'm not articulating it perfect, but Elizabeth kind of, for me, hit the, or just everybody did in general. But I like the way what you said. It's that seventh. So my brain's still processing. It's doing a lot of growing, but Elizabeth pretty much summed it up for me. So thank you.
Okay. Clara?
Oh my goodness. I just want to say thank you, everybody, because the contributions are phenomenal. And I absolutely love this work you're doing, Peter. I think it's invaluable. And I've been developing a body of work in my own lifetime. I realized later on in life, and Mary knows me through something else I've done, but I realized I was sensing the world on a metaphysical level as a spiritual healer and seer. And so everything that Patricia said just now, is it Latresia? Please don't apologize because
Patrizia Latrecchia.
Because
I'm an Italian-born American. Thank
well,
you. That's all right.
Yeah, well, I loved what you shared because my work has been about empowering others. I'm passionate about bringing a new self-awareness in. And so what you were saying about my work is about the pain body and helping people recognize where they get triggered. It's extremely invaluable. So I recognize what you shared in myself. Sometimes I numb out, or sometimes, you want to run away, you have an emotional response to something, and you just end up maybe shutting somebody out because you can't communicate what you'd really like to communicate with them because it might create a row or something else. So this whole process of the 7 levels of listening, I think in different ways, and thank you for sharing that, Peter, because we can work with that within our own models. And I know for me as a soul healer, I naturally do the Zen listening. But however, there are times when we're only human, and sometimes our ego or we get triggered and we might be dealing with somebody. And I know from my own personal experience, I want to deliver the very best that I can be for somebody. And, when we become listeners, there's a healing process, I believe, that happens with ourselves, because if we're listening to somebody and we get triggered by that, we're only human. It's like, then we can go back into that. And I think what I'm trying to say is that it allows us that space to breathe in and do all those things. I mean, I didn't know a name for it before, but I naturally go into a goodwill place. I kind of find that when something triggers me, I don't project it out. I take ownership of that, and I take responsibility for that. And it may be that we can't stay present in that moment because we're dealing with that emotional response that we're having from somebody. But the goodwill thing of taking ownership. So anyway, I'm waffling on a bit here because.
No, that's okay. You've got to say where you're located.
Okay, so I'm located in the UK, and I'm living in Somerset. I moved here 2.5 years ago. We had a big trauma in my family, which I won't discuss now. And I just wanted to kind of not bury myself for a bit, but I needed to deepen. And I've moved to a place called Somerset. So anybody in the UK knows it's a very beautiful county down in the sort of, it's like Devon and Cornwall. If you know the map of the UK, it's like the bit that looks like a sock or a toe that comes on down from the main part of the UK. So
whereabouts in Somerset?
So I'm not far from Lyme Regis Coast and the West Bay coastline. About 40 minutes in from there. I'm kind of Ilminster, Yeovil.
Oh, right, we know Somerset, yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you as well. I just want to say goodbye because I have to go. I want to be in integrity with another call that I have to make.
And
But
you
thank
got to
you
say
so
where
much for
you are.
acknowledging me. I'm in Florida. I'm
Okay.
I'm in Florida.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
I'm in Tampa too. Didn't hear me.
Hello? Yeah. Who's that?
Cease, you go next, Cease.
I'm probably about 10 minutes from wherever you are. Tampa.
Oh, okay, good.
Yes. So I left you my information in the chat. Maybe we can walk dogs together.
Oh,
Okay.
I don't have a dog, but yeah, thank you. Yeah, okay, let me check. So I'm walking. I see. All right, I guess, right. Peter connected us a few years ago, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay, lovely.
I brought stuff from your dad.
Yes, I do remember. Thank you so much. Thank you for acknowledging that and mentioning it.
I'd love to talk to some person sometime.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Thank you, Peter.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you,
Thank
Mary.
you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, Patricia.
Bye.
Mary Gulliman.
Yeah, I'm Mary. I'm in Rosarito Beach, Mexico, although I normally live in Topanga, California, near Los Angeles. And I'm struck by something that's very hard to convey to people, but that's so important, I think, which is I just love hearing the tools repeatedly. And that's what works with this work. You hear something different every time. I love having the recordings as a way of replacing what we had in the 70s, where we went to people like Elizabeth, and I don't know how long Cease went for, but Elizabeth and I went, we didn't know each other then, but we went repeatedly on the residential courses. My first or second one was 3 months long. I mean, you just really absorbed the tools with the repetition. And because it's tools, not a theory, personally, I never find it boring. You know, I really love today. I've already watched the chair work one. It was partly because I wanted to see my piece of work from the outside, but I watched a whole hour and a half because I just love hearing it again. There's always something new to learn. So that's my Pellin pitch, right?
Okay.
For this material really works with immersion and repetition. And I go red because I'm pitching.
Nikki?
I'm Nikki in Wimbledon, London. It's nice combination for me, just hearing the 7 levels and just realizing just how incredibly familiar they all are to me, and that I just work with them all the time. Sorry, even though if you asked me to give you a running order of them or even remember all the names, I wouldn't be able to at all. And so on the one hand, I've got all that familiarity, and then it's so nice as well to have, like you said, Peter, geographically, all these people in different places that I can just, you know, the different accents, meaning, gosh, I know all these people have got really different life experiences from me, just about culturally and where they live now and what they do for a living. And at the same time, we're all listening to this thing that's just really familiar to me. It's a lovely combination anyway.
Thank you. Mary Stapleton?
Oh, Mary, Eastbourne, East Sussex, south coast of England. Yes, the familiarity, the repetition is making it begin to feel more comfortable. I'm quite happy with you taking charge, Peter, and directing who speaks next.
Okay.
And yeah, so yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Victoria?
I'm Victoria Rosenberg. Well, it looks like I'm the only one for whom English is not native language anyway, so talk about the accents. Well, I'm here in Paris, France, as I was supposed to say in the American group. There are many Parises in America, I know now. I love the way you said it today, that Pellin is the school of thought and practice. So this is what I'm taking practice. Like my Buddhist teacher is saying, life is practice and practice is life. So all these 7 levels of listening, like none of us, your students, would be able probably to say like the way they are. But once you practice, like which number what, but I think it's like being, they became part of me. But I know when I stop being aware of practicing them, I'm losing something, this moment of present, like, yeah, the way I'm listening. And I know what helps me when I feel I'm distracted. I'll just tell Victoria, go back to it. And I go back to it. This is a little simple, mindful reminder of how to listen. Thank you for everything. So
Yeah,
I will continue practicing and thinking.
Can I just say something to Mary Stapleton? As Cease and Patricia had that thing. My great aunt, and I don't know if you know this little place, it's a few miles from you. My great aunt and grandmother lived for many years in Robertsbridge, and I've been going to Hastings and Robertsbridge since I was about 4. And my great aunt died in I think it's a Quaker nursing home in Eastbourne. Lived there for many years. I just wanted to put in the, because I think every week Mary Stapleton doesn't know I has this huge connection to East Sussex. I just had to put that in. Memory links.
Well, thank you for coming today. It's been great, and I'll see you Wednesday. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Clara. It was great to see
Oh,
you.
God, it was great. Yeah, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I didn't get to check in for myself. I was just yelling at Patricia.
Oh, please go ahead, Cease.
Okay.
Thank you.
Will you be sending an email
Bye-bye.
out for Wednesday or?
Yeah.
Perfect. I shall be there.
So,
Bye-bye, guys. Bye-bye.
Peter.
Check in.
Cease, you do it for us.
That I was hoping sometime, I don't know if it's even possible within this setup, if it's ever possible to do little breakout rooms and do some practice on the listening or some other thing. I would really enjoy that. It just helps me cement what we've been learning. I know that you can't really record that, but anyway, that's something to put up there.
I can answer that to some extent. Well, first of all, Peter doesn't even know that option exists. And secondly, I think if we did that, we could do it as a voluntary extension to the hour and a half, because we started out intending to do an hour and it just wasn't enough because of the rich sharing. But also we are starting to plan an online Pennon training course. And these Zoom meetings, which are recorded from about number 4 or 5, will go on happening twice a week. We'll go on be recording. There'll be this whole load of training material free on the new YouTube channel. But we do want to resurrect something that's more like the London training course as a paid online thing. And as those of you who aren't familiar with Pennon, we do make the prices for online, for any kind of training, in a moderate range, because we don't believe in high prices that keep people out, let's put it like that. So that's a very prior announcement, but it's an answer to what you said, Cecilia, to a sense, in that I don't know if we'll do it in this free meeting, because I mean, we may, but we'll be definitely, I'm sure we'd be using breakout groups in an online training course, because then you come back to the main group and you share what happened and stuff like that. One-on-one, I mean, you know, paired exercises can happen in breakout groups. You know, it's just a great tool to have for an online training course.
Okay, it meant a lot to me when we did it at Pelham to have the practice doing the passive listening and the other kinds of listening, and to really, it really sank in at that time. So just a thought.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's really worth thinking about.
When you bring I just have a question. When you're bringing up a Pelin training course, I'm a little confused with that. Is the Pelin something just therapists do, or is it something?
No, not at all. No,
Oh,
no.
okay.
I mean, the training has been going out to foster carers. I mean, I went in as a confused nobody with not knowing what I wanted to do in my life in my 20s. It's a model where it says there's a way. The life tools would be very interesting to you, Clara. I think not just Clara, but some of the others of us know them. It's a way of saying Pelin tools help you find where you are and what kind of contribution you want to make, which may or may not be in the people work arena. Even without it, there are many of the Pelin tools are relevant to the world of business, to the world of theatrical venture, so it's not for training therapists per se. It's anyone who has an interest who may not even know how they're going to use it. It's not a problem in this model.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, now I'll stop recording.
Yes.